government that isn't funded by local monies? I mean, that's part of the emperor's no clothes issue, is we're talking about being overtaxed, but the reality is we're not paying for most of the local government spending, rural, city, and school districts. So are we really having the full discussion about the level of government spending and the level and who's paying for it? I mean, I am, to some degree, looking for intellectual honesty and linkage between services, and we have lost this thing. We're at the notion of we can increase the exemption to 100,000. Why? Because we can, and we're troubled by the fact that we're reducing taxes on large property taxpayers. Why is that a bad thing? The people that work in those businesses are paying taxes already. I think Wolfgang talks about double taxation. Where's the linkage between services and those? I'm wanting this discussion at the local levels, and I'm troubled by the fact that we won't get it because of how this vote's probably going down. And we'll just go on our merry way with 5 to 10% increase annually at the local government, the borough level, anyway, driven by school district budgets.
When did you think you had that last? That discussion?
I recall having it when I was there.
You're a good man.
I mean, maybe I'm colored by my own memory of the past.
Yes, question.
Bonnie, before the point is lost, I think that it's important that I clarify that if there's anything that I've said today that would indicate that the mayor's office and the mayor specifically would take passage of or failure to pass this vote as any sort of indication that he would have a free rein on spending and that spending could increase, that would be highly inaccurate. And if I've given any impression of that today, I would certainly apologize for that and correct it right now. And that I have not heard anything from my mayor that would indicate that.
Well, his name's on the ordinance as the sponsor.
His name being on the ordinance.
But he doesn't support it.
I'm clarifying for the room and for the press, and I think you understand how these things go, that the comment that the mayor would think that if we pass this, that we don't have to look at budgets and we don't have to be responsible and we don't have to contain spending would be inaccurate. And I'm clarifying that right now.
You had a question.
No one talks about the real reason for all the increase, and it's labor and it's the inflation proofing. And why isn't that ever addressed? And I understand that the borough, and you can clarify if you've researched it, or I brought it to attention in the public meeting before, that it's within the power of the borough to negotiate each contract separately, and they don't have to put the inflation proofing in there. And 85% of every budget, whether it's the government or the school, is labor. It's not pencils and computers and gas and trucks. It's labor. And when you take the inflation proofing and multiply it after 20 years, your budget has doubled. And you already just said that the new construction has saved a bacon and doubled your budget in 10 years, and that's why you've been able to keep up with, the government workers all getting, inflation proofed, whereas in the private sector it doesn't really work that way. And so we're struggling in the private sector to keep up with the
Okay, let him answer.
Okay, but one more thing, that like the schools, that we're paying, what is it, $15,000 between state, borough, and federal monies to educate each student. And I mean, if you just took that $200,000 it would take to educate and put it in invested in it, they wouldn't even need to have a career. So it's beyond the point of ridiculousness of what it costs to educate a student. The borough, that's the large chunk, iron share of their budget is the schools, and it's, like you said, it's way beyond the pale of ridiculousness.
I guess I don't agree with you that it's way beyond the pale of ridiculousness and we ought to invest it. That some statements that you made, I don't agree with. But in terms of the budget. So, going back to the state's even considering now with their joint task force making a recommendation that the state's going to put more money into education. So therefore we'll be getting, if this becomes part of the next year's funding cycle for school funding, they have looked at that and they say that either the intensive needs students need more funding than what we get all over the state. So we will be getting more money for our school system, okay? So I guess I'll feel that I would have to say that in terms of what they're increasing funding towards, focusing down on school budgets, what the state is giving us, I'm fine with that. The intensive needs students require more intensive spending requirements. terms of inflation proofing and contracts, I voted to say that the contract that was negotiated by the administration, whether school district or the borough and their representative unions, I was satisfied with that. I did not say I want to unfund some of those. I'm satisfied with it. I think it's a fair agreement, and that's what that process is. I stand by that.
We took a different approach at the city. Our labor costs were a major headache, as you know, over the years. Since we have 4 different unions, he wants to negotiate with 1. And we have trying to get all those in line with each other, but we've been pretty strict at the city, or tried to be. And when I was looking at your budget, I was amazed to see how many 6-digit salaries are at the borough now. We don't have any at the city. And I was always under the impression they did a better job than we did over there. That's why I guess I disagree with Luke a little bit. I think there's room for improvement. But that's the system over there. The administration negotiates it, the assembly passes it. At the council, we take active part in negotiation. It's a different system.
Okay, one more question. Jay?
Just a point, since this is a room full of ideas, I was just sitting here listening, and there seems to be a consensus in the room that sales tax will dampen economic activity, that a sales tax will drive purchasing decisions onto the internet, out of state. There's a consensus that a 1% tax will lead to 2%, 3%, 4%, that it'll get out of control. There's a consensus that the room and the community will vote against it. And not only are we talking about sales tax, but we also have just framed precisely the governor's debate about increasing oil taxes on the industry and dampening investment up on the North Slope to get more oil in the pipeline. You can draw your own conclusions, but what's bad for the goose is also bad for the gander.
Okay, thank you all very much for coming today. Did you buy a ticket? We got $84 in the pocket. Four 258-71.
71. 871?
871. Now you gotta draw the joker up here. Okay, next week we're going to hear from... Okay, next week we start that pot over again. Next week we are going to hear from city council candidates. I noticed that a number of them have withdrawn. First they accepted the invitation and then they withdrew, but that's okay. We're going to hear from the city council candidates, and the races are still competitive. And that's, no, I have one more comment on the personnel.
Better comment.
For every $100 that the borough pays in gross salaries, they have to shell out an additional $69 and something for the broad category benefits, which includes mandated things like unemployment, workers' comp, whatever. The 2 biggies are health and public employees retirement system. The 2 combined are I think, 51%. And the PERS liability has created the PERS one. Negotiations could affect the health. It is possible, Mayor's office, to negotiate in the next contract a cap. Establish a health savings account. Say, all right, this is what you get, and if you don't use it, you get to pass it on to the next year or put it in your pocket, whatever, but you can cap the cost. It is really, really high.